Hey, my name is Emma, and welcome to my podcast, where each week I'll be inviting a guest on and asking them the question, do you mind sharing your life experiences with me? Where we'll be talking about social issues, political issues, mental health, and everything in between. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Thank you so much, Daragh, for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's a lovely space, as we were talking about. It's very feels kind of like you're just in someone's living room.
Yeah.
But it's like a very nice living room. Like not my living room. My living room doesn't look like this.
It's like our little safe space.
Yeah. It's really nice.
It's nice. But this has been like a little, I suppose, idea kind of blossoming in my mind for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that I've always wanted to have you on and have you included in, because we met through, I think, a special way.
Mm-hmm,
we live in the same area, which is crazy.
Yeah, like one of your neighbours used to be one of my neighbours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we never kind of crossed paths.
No.
But we crossed paths through, I suppose, my mental health journey,
Mm-hmm.
and then learning your journey.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually never asked you to introduce yourself. So do you want to introduce yourself, Daragh?
Always hard to do. I'm Daragh.
Hello.
I run a blog called Thoughts Too Big. I think that's probably my main thing. And I'm also a writer. So I write mental health stuff, have a book called Lonely Boy. And yeah, I think the reason we've always, since we've met, have connected is because we share a passion for, normalizing the chat around mental health, spreading awareness. Because we live in this era where it's very hard to get help unless you have lots of money, and most people don't have lots of money. So it's just trying to make people feel heard, I think. And I think that's why that's why I think we've, resonated with each other.
100%. And I suppose, kind of going back a little bit, how did you first get into the whole realm of mental health, or even go down this journey of what you're currently doing right now?
So my thing, a lot of people know this by now, but my best friend took his own life, and when he was 18, I was 17, and that was my I'd never heard of mental health before that. I kind of, and it was a privilege, but I'm happy to say that I lived in a bubble as a child and as a teenager. I had a good upbringing, and mental health and suicide were things that happened to other people in other places,
Yeah.
Suicide, I'd heard of suicide, but I was well, that's never going to affect our world. And because of the world we lived in then, 11 years ago, there was no talk about mental health, no mental health awareness. There was no encouraging people to speak about their mental health. So my friend never did, and ended up taking his own life. And that was kind of the intro to mental health for me. And the intro is that your mental health can get so bad that it'll kill you.
It can destroy you.
And then after that, I grieved Derby, and that grief morphed into depression for me. And again, because of the lack of education, I didn't even know I was depressed.
Wow.
Because I always thought depression, when I was younger, I thought depression meant you were sad all the time.
Yeah.
And it's just that's not the case. You're just very numb to everything. And I was okay, this is just how adults feel then.
Yeah.
No one feels emotion.
Everyone's just sad.
Yeah. No one feels anything. And then, when I was in college, I learned about depression. I was oh, that kind of sounds like what I'm going through. And then, but then again, because of the stigma, I knew I might have been depressed, but I kind of denied it to myself.
Yes, yeah.
And it was only until I had this massive panic attack that I was okay, I can't really ignore this anymore. Yeah. And I went to get therapy in college. And then after that is when I started to kind of work in mental health, and when I started the blog, because I guess for me it was always, I just wanted obviously to prevent suicide, because that's, no one should have to take their own lives. And then the other side of it was I also wanted to prevent people having to bereave suicide, because it's, that was my experience, and that was awful. So that was the whole premise of everything. And it was just, the only way I know how to do it, because I wasn't and I'm not a qualified person, is just, if I talk about mental health openly, then other people might feel that they can too. And that will normalize that conversation. And that's basically what I've been doing for 7 years.
Yeah. And I think that's amazing, because from seeing your stuff online, it showed me that it's okay to be vulnerable online, even though it's such I suppose social media can get a bad rap sometimes. I think the mental health community I know that I'm a part of anyway, and I feel safe sharing the stuff that I do share.
Yeah, like the mental health community, just really supportive. I think where the nasty side of it comes from is people that aren't really in that community and they're kind of cynical. And, you know, it's totally natural to like not want that attention, the negative attention.
Definitely.
But it just comes with the territory of like putting yourself out there. And also what I kind of learned early enough is that anyone who has something bad to say about what you're doing never really says it to your face.
Yes.
Say it behind your back, or they say it in comments, and you just learn to ignore it.
Definitely.
And like, no matter who you are or what you do, someone's not going to like you.
Yeah.
So, you know, even if you're doing like the best work of it, like I always say, like, people didn't like Jesus, you know?
That's so true.
He was like the goat. So
that is so true.
You know, so no one can get out from under that. So you just have to accept it, and that makes it easier. Yeah. But it's not easy at the start.
No. Did you ever feel fear going into what you're doing now? I suppose as a career, because I suppose it can, I know mental health, I've heard this before, it can be such a political thing. And if you're looking to go into any sort of, I was always afraid of, what am I going to do getting a job? Like, am I going to be discriminated against or stigmatized, that I won't be seen as reliable or like valuable as an employee because I have mental health issues and I'm sharing it online? Like, was that ever a thing for you?
I don't think so. Like, it kind of comes in a similar type of conversation when I remember when I started getting tattoos that were like visible.
Yeah.
And my brother was like, well, don't get them like on your arms because you won't get employed, because, you know, some employers won't.
Yes.
And I was like, well, I don't really want to work for a place that won't let me have like, I have a tattoo here that says be good.
Yeah.
So I was like, I don't want to work for a place who won't let me have a tattoo that says be good. And I kind of feel similar about like mental health. Like, I don't want to work for a place who are going to like think poorly of me because I'm talking openly about mental health and trying to help people. So like,
and that's the root of it, really, isn't it?
Yeah, that is it. So like, you know, once you kind of resolve for that, then it makes it easier. But like, but I've like, to be frank, like I've never had an issue where people were like, oh, well, you talk about mental health, and we find that like that's never come up, thankfully, just because of the place of work. Like, I've worked in a mental health charity, so obviously they're very happy I talk openly about it. So.
And I think just to put people's mind at rest also, like, it is okay to talk openly about your mental health, and it's not going to necessarily affect your job or your career or your life goals, you know, that it's actually okay. And hopefully by seeing this, that you realize, I don't have to be afraid of sharing.
Exactly.
You know, that like, I still can have a job. I can still work in academia. I can still do what I want to do. And also like share your story, because I mean, it's your life. It's your story. It's a powerful thing.
100%.
You know?
And like, and I've always felt like there's been this thing my whole life where like there was this idea that like no one suffered from mental health, and it was very rare, like mental health issues, and it was very rare. But like the reality is like we all have struggles with mental health.
Yeah.
Some of it goes as far as mental illness. That's not everyone, but everyone has like if you get stressed one day or you have a bad day or you're anxious, that's your mental health in flux. Like, so everyone deals with mental health.
Yeah.
And I think that's just becoming more normalized, and that's really good. And that's why I think more and more you're going to see, like, you know, if you're talking about your mental health publicly, employers aren't going to have a problem.
Definitely.
Now, I still think there's a lot of stigma for certain mental health problems. Like,
yes,
it's kind of fair game to talk about like anxiety, depression.
That's what I find. There can be often a lot of stigma, even around OCD, you know, in even in employment, you hear, oh, I'm so OCD, or, you know, more serious mental health issues like schizophrenia, bipolar, all of those things. They can be a lot more, people can back from that.
Yeah.
Because I think even from like old media, you know, it's seen as a scary thing, but there's people out there that live with hearing voices and go through so many different visual hallucinations, different somatic sensations. I deal with that myself, and we can still cope with everyday life, you know, like it's just about managing it. And I think just to put out like that, we're not scary people, you know?
Yeah. And I think that's the basis of it. Like there's a huge fear of certain mental illnesses like schizophrenia for one. And due to ignorance and like lack of education, but it's also due to like Hollywood and how it's portrayed in TV and movies that like schizophrenics or people who hear voices are always violent and they're always dangerous, and it's like that's not true.
No.
Like and I think so there's just a lack of education, and just there's still a lot of stigma for certain mental illnesses, but like, you know, we're moving in the right direction. So like we've gotten to a point where we're comfortable with depression and anxiety, so the next one might be like OCD, and then eventually we're
taking it off the list.
It's just, you know, it's a slow burner because you know, changing cultural attitudes can't really happen overnight.
Definitely.
And we lived in a culture in Ireland for like most of our history where we're just like, you know, you'd say stuff like, "Oh, he suffers with his nerves," or have like you wouldn't really address it.
That's a big one you hear, isn't it? Yeah. The person suffers with their nerves.
And that's just the most vague term of all
time. You're like, what? What does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Yeah. No, but that's so true. And I think even thinking of, okay, like what gives you the motivation to get up and do this every day? Because I know for me, it's trying to let people know that they have a voice. And that's my main message, you know, that everyone going through the mental health systems have a voice and they deserve to be heard and they deserve to be cared for, you know. But sometimes I feel like I'm just this one little person up against this whole big system, you know, and how can I make a difference, I suppose. And it kind of goes up and down, because I feel like sometimes, I'm doing a little bit, I'm being heard a little bit, but I think it's more on a community level that we can make a difference. But sometimes that motivation lacks, because I'm like, feel like I'm looking at this big, massive, like Great Wall of China. And have you ever come across that where you just feel like you're just climbing up this massive mountain, you don't know how you're going to get up it?
Yeah, definitely. Like especially with the health system, like it can feel like, okay, I'm one person and I'm trying to make a difference, but like you're kind of just like one boat in an ocean. But like, and this is probably a good analogy to use. Like, so like that feels overwhelming, but like as you go along that, you find people in the water and you're pulling them into the boat with you.
Yes.
Like, and that I think so. Like while you're trying to do like this big thing, you're still doing small, meaningful things for the people who hear you.
Yeah.
And like you probably already are getting this, but like it'll happen more often as you know your platform grows. Is like people will just reach out and thank you.
Definitely.
And they'll be like, I felt alone and now I don't. And that for me is like the most meaningful. Like it's great to have this, you know, end goal of like changing everything, but changing individual lives and helping individuals is like really meaningful to me. And I think
definitely
focusing on that makes it so you're just focusing on what's like in front of you now rather than what's up the hill.
Yeah, because I think I've had to come to terms with, okay, I might want to change everything realistically. You know, this is at a government level.
Yeah,
I may not be able to change everything, but I can try little by little to make differences, you know, around me with my neighbors, friends, work, community.
Yeah, and it's like, and it's also like, there's no one of us that's gonna like change it on our own. So like you're making differences in your like audience. I am, the silly heads there. Hundreds of different people are working on their own to make a difference in their circle, and that all comes together as one big impact. And that it'll just be a tide of that'll change everything. So
definitely.
Like I feel like possibly you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself to change it on your own, and like you don't have to feel it. And that's why the mental health community is so good, because it's very
100%.
It's very easy to see that like you're not alone.
Yeah,
and you're like there's other people doing a lot of work, and that can be comforting. And it also takes the pressure off, because like
it does.
Some weeks you don't want to. Like,
some weeks you're like, I just want a break.
Yeah. And that's fine. You deserve a break. Like,
definitely.
You don't have to, especially because like all of this work is like coming from a place of like volunteering and just passion for it. So like it can be exhausting, and you know often it can feel like there's no reward for it. So like you need to take time off.
I think so, to regather. Yeah. And I find, just from talking to other people, like a lot of people within mental health are super creative. How did you find your creativity through mental health, because you're such a great author and writer and
Thank you.
speaker. So, and the list goes on. I just don't have enough words to keep it going. It's too many words.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
But how did you find your creativity through that? Or was that just a therapeutic way for you to let out all that emotion?
It's a good question. Like I always loved writing. It was always something like, but I never really like thought I'd be a writer, say, but I always like in school or even when I was a young child, like I'd be writing like these like stupid poems about like monkeys and stuff for my parents. And then in secondary school, this always really like looked forward to English tests because I meant I could write a new short story.
Yeah.
Like, and that was like fun for me. But then, you know, I never, again, didn't go to college for it or anything. And then, but I always had this like writing always like a comfort zone for me. So it made me feel kind of like safe. And that's why the blog started. And it was just very like non-fiction and not like typically creative writing.
Yeah.
And then it was like when I was doing my master's, I essentially was just procrastinating doing my actual master's work. And I was just writing these like just weird and funny short stories for my friends. And I just written a load of them because I just didn't want to do the work. And then one of my friends was like, oh, you should try and get these published. And that's kind of where that started.
Wow.
So it's always kind of been in me to write. But even like, it's just weird how you think about yourself changes over time. Because like when I was growing up to the age of like 20, 21, I would have never like considered myself to be creative at all.
Really?
Yeah, never. Like I was like, no, I'm not creative. I'm
Wow.
just good at school, whatever. Yeah, so that changed. And like it was I almost felt like conceited or arrogant to like admit that I was creative.
Wow.
I don't know why or where that comes from, but it's a huge part of my life. Like it's like, as you said, very therapeutic. And just, you know, if I can sit down and write something, it's just, I think like the things humans do, like bees make honey, humans create things. Like,
definitely.
that's what we do.
Yeah.
And that gives me a great sense of fulfillment. So like if I can sit down and bring something into the world that's never existed before, that gives me a great sense of like, I've done something today.
Yeah. And
no matter where I am or what's happening, that's always available to me because I always need like paper and a pen. Like it's very accessible. Like, so that's a great comfort that I found that, because I think up until 22, I was in this position where like everyone around me knew exactly what they wanted to be.
Yeah.
Like, I know I'm going to be a doctor, an engineer, I'm going to do this with my life.
That's hard.
I never had an idea. And I was like, what's wrong with me? Like,
yeah.
I don't have a thing, you know?
Yes.
And then I found the thing and I was like, oh, I'm going to protect the thing because that's, you know, I think having that thing is really important. You know?
It is. Yeah. It just feels like hope. And I think a little bit of hope can spur you on to so much, you know, just even if you're having a bad day or a couple of days, that just, for me anyway, that glimpse of hope, even like meeting someone for a coffee or like doing something comforting that gives you a bit of hope for tomorrow's going to be a little better.
Yeah.
Like that's gold, like that's gold dust, because I don't, like, without hope, I don't see how I could have a future. Like I hope to have a great future. And I know that now I can dream for that. I didn't see that before, you know. I just saw a lot of blackness and darkness, and it does creep in sometimes, but I think that hope has given me little spurs of light that just come in sometimes.
Yeah, and that's really like, that's a really powerful way to frame it in your mind, because like you could frame it 100 different ways and make it a negative thing, but that's really like, because like, you know, especially when you're dealing with the stuff you're dealing with, like I can only imagine how tough it can get. Like, so to be able to see a light through it is really like important. So
definitely. Yeah, I think it's something you need to work really hard on. And I think people, and I'm sure people, you know, going through depression, anxiety, it's something you need to work on daily. And it can feel like such like a struggle. You're like, tomorrow I have to go through this again. What do you mean? Like, I thought this was just gonna last for a couple of months or a while, you know, but just finding people around you, the right supports. And I suppose I was wondering as well, like, do you think, this might be a big question, do you think we're doing enough, like our generation, to kind of advocate for change for the next generation? Because I just see so much I suppose that even kids, and through the whole pandemic, and especially with OCD, I hear so many stories of kids being really severely affected with OCD, and they're like 9 or 10 because of the pandemic, and are we doing enough to try and create something for them that's not the HSE, or I don't know, just trying to protect them in some way? Because I feel like I just want to protect people from going through all of this, and even more from the effects that are happening socially. And
and it's such a interesting idea, because I was part of probably one of the last generations that didn't grow up with a smartphone available to me since I was 6. I mean, I got my first phone, I was 11, and it was a Nokia 3210.
I think I was the same,
and you can only play Snake on that.
Yep.
So I think the issue is that not that we're not even doing enough, but they're facing things no one else has faced.
Yeah.
Growing up constantly, because we're now living constantly stimulated by social media and our phones, and our attention spans and our brains are suffering from that. But I can only imagine the damage it's doing to kids' brains, and there's not enough safeguards in place against
Definitely
that.
Not.
So it's even hard to predict what type of issues they're going to be facing, because there's a huge increase in diagnosis of ADHD, and maybe and there's a case to be made that is being overdiagnosed, because it's not a case that they have ADHD, but the world they live in is
it's just
priming them.
overstimulated.
It's priming everyone for ADHD. Everyone has symptoms of ADHD now, because that's the world we live in. But how do we prevent people are addicted to it? So it's suggesting to take time away from your phone. People are that's a good idea, but not really doing it.
Exactly.
And kids are going to be less inclined to be disciplined with that type of thing. So I just don't even know. It's probably not even a question of are we doing enough? I don't even know what we should be doing.
And that's the thing, I think, as well, seeing for me, it's kind of a part of that whole question is seeing that massive gap. I know we've talked about this so much between the private and the public mental health system, and the information that they both provide is at such a different level.
Yeah.
And the quality of service that I've experienced is at such a different level that I think if we could find a middle ground in that, and have the specialized education and help at a young age, the impact that we could make. And I think that's just education again.
Yeah, and there is not to plug the charity I work for, but we have a schools program for primary school children now and from next year on it'll be available for every class in primary school, where they're it's a teacher-led 10-week program where they learn about mental health and emotional well-being, and understanding difficult emotions, and understanding how to spot signs of different things.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a voluntary thing at the moment in schools. You can sign up for it, but it's not part of the curriculum.
Yes,
and I think it needs to become part of the curriculum in both primary and secondary, and I think that will make an impact. But it's just bizarre that it's not already been there.
Yeah, that it's not an everyday kind of thing.
Yeah.
So what can we see from you coming in the future? Or what's your, I suppose, if you had some dream or aspirations?
Yeah, I don't know. I've never
or are you a planner, actually?
No, that's what
I'm
I was
not either.
Say.
Yeah.
I've always kind of because my career to date has been kind of all over the place. I've always just kind of gone with my gut and what feels right, and that seems to have worked so far. So I never really am by this time I want to have done this, because whenever I have done that, it typically you end up to some degree disappointed, because it doesn't work out exactly in the time you wanted.
Or in the way you wanted. Yeah.
So I just kind of go, oh my God, I think for me, I'm gonna continue writing. That's kind of the main thing, and then do as much as I can in the mental health space, and just see what happens. There's a lot more requests for like public speaking, which is like,
that's amazing.
It's weird. I don't know, like maybe you can chime in on this as well, but like public speaking to me had never been like on the radar.
Never.
It just kind of became part of it.
Yeah. It's like it's integrated in with it. Because if you had said to me, like before all this happened, you'll be speaking publicly somewhere, I don't know what I would have done. No, I would have ran out the door.
I'm not doing this then.
Like I was the quiet girl in the corner who had no opinion whatsoever and was just like, yeah, okay, to everything, you know? And so now like doing public speaking, it's just mind blowing to me. But you're at the same position. You never thought you wanted to do this.
No. And how are you finding it? Like, are you enjoying it?
I love it. And I don't know why. Like I never wanted to, like even doing poems. Remember like in school when you had to stand up and do a poem? I'd stutter the whole way through. Never could do it. But for some reason, like I have no problem standing up in front of a room of people now and speaking about something that means so much to me and that I'm passionate about. And maybe that's the reason. But I think I've just gained some confidence through all this chaos, you know? And it's just come in such a natural way that like I want to get up and speak to a room of people.
Yeah, well, that's brilliant.
Which is mad to me.
It's nice to be able, like, you know, as I was talking about finding writing, like finding that you enjoy something like that.
Yeah.
You never thought you would is like really like obviously a lot, like the reason you have to do it or were chosen to do it is because you've been through such a tough time.
Yes.
So finding a positive in that is quite nice.
It is. 'Cause it's hard to find a positive in it some days when sometimes I'm like just asking myself over and over, why did this happen to me? Why me? Like feeling sorry for yourself, like why is this happening to me? But then on some days that are a bit brighter, I can be like, yeah, well, I've met this person and I've gotten this opportunity and I've been able to speak here and there and it's all meant something. But I suppose you always wonder in the back of your head, what could life have been if this didn't happen, you know?
Yeah.
But we'll never know that, I suppose.
Yeah, like I had a lot of thoughts like that for a long time about like my life and how it turned out and like would it be different if Irby hadn't died?
Yeah.
Because I often think it's weird, like it's strange and maybe this resonates with you, like there's almost a level of gratitude for all the horrible stuff because like maybe I wouldn't be writing, maybe I wouldn't have found writing, maybe I wouldn't be doing work that's meaningful to me.
Definitely.
And to be grateful to something awful for happening for that is a very complex thing to deal with.
It's a complex feeling, I think, because I don't want to be grateful for what I went through.
No.
And I don't know, in some ways I am because I've gained so much. Well, I say so much confidence in myself. I had zero confidence. So maybe I've gained 5% of confidence in myself. But it's something, you know, and like, it's a big feeling. It's a big feeling, that complexity while having gratitude at the same time.
Yeah. And maybe it's gratitude might be the right word. I think like it's more acceptance. Like I think, you know, for a long time I would have resisted that he was gone and I would have been, you know, questioning it and hurt. And I think I eventually had to accept that that's just the way life had gone.
Yeah.
And then that's when I started noticing like all the positives that had happened since then. I think that's probably more the feeling, but it's just weird because some days, you know, it's not like you accept something and then you've accepted forever.
Definitely.
Some days you accept it easier than other days. And but it's just strange. I think like, you know, that happening and what happened to you, it knocks you onto a certain path.
Yep.
And there's good and bad parts of each path, but like, yeah, like say if what happened to you hadn't happened, would you be in a completely different?
Yeah. Or
would it be the same? Like it's hard.
It would be or what does that even look like? But I suppose, just accepting. It's hard to accept sometimes where you are, but maybe that's part of the journey too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Acceptance, like, 'cause I'm big into like Stoic philosophy, and that's a big part of it. Like accepting where you are in life, your circumstances, accepting your emotions is like the ideal goal. Yeah. So it's not like they're saying you have to be like this and you will be like this all the time, but that's like the what you're aiming for is
Yes.
like acceptance. So like some days it's easier to be accepting and some days it's harder. And I think keeping that in mind is it's important. you
Yeah.
know?
But yeah, I suppose that is the big thing, acceptance
Mhm.
really. And
And how do you find that for
it's hard.
Yeah.
To be honest, I find it really hard
Yeah.
because there's a lot of emotions about what happened to me, like having to go public with my story, especially when I feel a lot of anger about that sometimes because I feel like I shouldn't have had to.
Yeah.
I should have been able to do it in a private and more discreet way.
Mhm.
But I think just out of other, like having no choice, that I came out with my story and it's led me here. But the acceptance around it is definitely, as you said, some days are a little bit easier
Mhm.
and some days are really hard because it's taken so much from my life, I think.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm so passionate about like advocating for a better mental health system, because I've been in the system since I was 12 and 13 in CAMS, the child and adolescent mental health. So that was horrific in itself,
Yeah.
And then going to the adult services was a completely different experience. You're an adult, but you're kind of not treated as one, and you're not treated like you deserve to have a voice or
Okay.
an opinion in your care.
Mhm.
And it's hard to accept all that. But I suppose what's making it easier is being progressive about it and doing something about it.
Yeah.
Because I just couldn't sit in it anymore. I couldn't wallow in the anger and the disgust in the whole thing.
Mhm.
So doing what I'm doing now, even though it's on such a tiny scale, it helps my acceptance of the situation, because maybe someone will listen to it and think, okay, I can actually speak up for myself at this appointment.
Yeah.
And that's okay, And if that's all anyone can get out of it, then I'm like, my day is kind of made.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, because I think a lot of it comes into like wanting to have control, and I think a lot of the stuff with cams and like the output, I imagine like a lot of it is outside your control,
It
and that's
is. Yeah,
very
massively.
frustrating.
Yeah.
So I suppose like maybe what's helped is that you're now taking control of what you can control.
I think so.
And that's probably because I think, in mental health, and even that's why I always talk about like mental health routines, is like even having like, even if it's an illusion of control, it makes it easier to deal with, because you're like, at least I have over this little corner of my life, I have some say, and that's like gives me something to hold on to,
That's so true. That's 100% it. It's having some say now over what I didn't have for years, and having some sort of control over it. But in maybe a more positive way than I thought control was. I think with OCD and eating disorders and stuff, control can be such a restrictive and kind of it's such a restrictive thing. But now the control is more of an open, positive light, I suppose. If that makes any sense.
No, I get you, because I'm especially like, I don't have OCD and I've never had an eating disorder, but I imagine dealing with both of those simultaneously is a huge challenge. Like, so
massive. It's both on control, and one of them I always kind of describe it as like one of them can wear a cloak and just morph into the next one. And it's really confusing to kind of know which one you're dealing with at which point. But I think a lot of those come together as well as like a package deal.
Right, yeah.
I think just from talking to people, they're like, oh yeah, I've had OCD and an eating disorder. Or I've had an eating disorder and bipolar, or so kind of.
It's like rare to have one without the other.
I think so. I think so. Just from my experience, anyway. But overall, I mean, if I can just take the years of loss as something learned, if I can come to accept that, I think that will be a massive thing in my recovery.
Yeah, because even to come back to the whole idea of gratitude about it, like, you know, if you hadn't gone through all that stuff, you wouldn't be who you are now.
No.
And, you know, that's true for me as well. And I hadn't been for years. And that was a big part of the problem I struggle with. But I'm a big fan of who I am now.
I think you're amazing.
I feel like you should feel the same about yourself. And like, it's hard to be like, well, I really like who I am now, but also the road that led me to get to become this person, I wish I didn't have to go through.
Yes.
But also, if I didn't go through it, would I be the person I am now?
Yeah.
And it's like a whole mixed bag of like, you know, you just have to like accept that it happened, even though you don't really want to have it to have happened.
I think so.
It's just like, okay, I guess I just have to take that.
Yeah.
You know?
Take it. So I suppose for anyone listening, going through a really hard time and that just has no hope and no kind of picture of any sort of future for themselves,
Mm-hmm.
I hope they can kind of see our stories and think, okay, yeah, it's hard to accept what you're going through and it's hard to be going through that. But there will come a time when there is little sprouts of hope coming up and there are people out there who understand.
For sure.
Is there anything that you'd say to anyone listening now who's going through a rough time?
Well, yeah, I think quite a common thing, and what for me for sure, like when I was depressed, just convinced myself I was on my own.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite a common, like even a common symptom of depression is that you're just convinced you're on your own. And
I think it convinces you that you're on your own.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And like the anxious voice kind of tells you that everyone hates you.
Yeah.
And, you know, that anxious voice is like, can be like a kind of a trickster because it lies to you, but it also points in the direction of the thing you should be focusing on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the main thing is like, and it's said so much, kind of has become a cliche, but like you actually aren't on your own, even though it feels like it. I think one of my favorite lyrics that I heard recently was there's a rapper named Dave, and he named his album "We're All Alone in This Together."
Yeah,
and I think that's kind of like the perfect,
amazing title.
Yeah, and I think that's how I look at it now. Like you feel like you're on your own, but you're not, and I think there's strength in that. Like so,
definitely.
Just to focus on that and find your community, and it's very easy now. Like I mean, when Irby died, we didn't really have the big social media thing, and that is good and bad, but like now there's a positive thing in it that like you can find people.
Yeah.
You can find so many people. Yeah.
And where can we find you on social media?
Nice segue. Very good. Instagram and Twitter is at Daragh Fleming, and the blog is at Thoughts Too Big with a 2 rather than the word.
And people should definitely check you out because you're doing super creative work, super helpful work, and just helping, I think, everyone get a bit of laughter and positivity in as well.
I appreciate it.
So thank you so much, Daragh, for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
My little new venture.
Oh, it's amazing. I can't wait to see where it goes because it's
me too. I'm excited.
It's exciting. Yeah, it's exciting, and I imagine because I was very excited to come on and talk to you because I get on great with you, but I feel like a lot of people are going to be like, I want to go on and have a chat, because it's very I've done a lot of podcasts, but this has been a very open and just natural conversation. It hasn't been some of these could often be interviewee kind of things, and this has just been a chat, and that's really nice.
That's so nice.
Mm-hmm.
That's so nice, and I'm really glad you enjoyed. So thank you so much, Daragh. Thank you. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed. If you want any further information about any of the topics we discussed, please go to the show notes below where you can find all the relevant links. See you next week.